"You're not ready yet," my husband whispered, squeezing my hand. My heart sank. His voice was calm, but his words cut through me. We stood in the conference room where he was about to introduce the new partner. I wanted to scream, "I built this company with you." But instead I swallowed my pride. He smiled and said, "Focus on the kids. They need you." Our twins, both 17, did fine on their own. They were nearly adults. But he acted like I was still stuck in diaper duty. I glanced around the room at our employees. Their eyes flicked between me and Helen, the junior associate who stood by my husband's side. My husband said Helen was a rising talent who will bring fresh ideas. All I could do was smile and clap along. Inside, my chest felt hollow. I thought of the long nights building his first pitch decks and drafting client proposals while our kids slept in the next room. Yet here I was, overlooked. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the respect. Still, I forced a supportive grin. He leaned in, whispering again, "Don't worry, you'll always be my real partner." That line almost felt romantic, almost. But something dark coiled in my gut. The room burst with applause as my husband raised a glass to toast Helen's partnership. I held my glass high, my lips curved in a practiced smile. No one could tell I felt betrayed. I hugged Helen, even though her name burned in my throat. The cameras flashed, capturing what should have been a joyful moment for us all. When I first joined his company, we were just two dreamers with a tiny office. I was the one who found our early clients. I was the one who balanced the books, set up calls, took meeting notes, and refined his ideas. Now, in this shining moment, I was invisible. Helen stood close to him, her hand resting on his shoulder. He brushed it off like it was nothing. I told myself it was just a coworker's friendly touch. Yet my heart twisted in ways I couldn't understand. As they poured champagne, I recalled every sacrifice, countless nights away from our twins, missing birthdays, missed vacations, all for this company. My husband placed a hand on my back. "Smile," he whispered. So I did. I laughed with them, took pictures with them, and pretended I wasn't dying inside. But that bitter aftertaste lingered. Back home, I tried to relax, but the house felt haunted by my insecurities. The twins were asleep, so I found myself alone in our bedroom, staring at the partnership announcement photos. The color drained from my cheeks every time I saw Helen's bright grin next to his. He told me I wasn't ready, that I should focus on the kids. But the kids didn't need me the same way they did years ago. They were almost adults with their own lives. They had phones, friends, and hobbies that no longer needed me guiding every step. I was free to grow as a professional. Why then didn't he give me the seat at the table that I deserved? I shook my head, trying to push away the questions. My heart kept me awake. I thought, he's my husband. He's always been good to me. Maybe I'm just not as fresh as Helen. Maybe he sees something in her that I lack. The idea made my stomach clench. Still, I couldn't sleep. I told myself he loves me. He's never lied to me before. Yet my mind replayed that moment when Helen touched his shoulder. And I couldn't shake the unsettling thought that maybe I was missing something big. The next morning, I walked into the office with forced confidence. I greeted everyone, plastering on a brave smile. My husband was away at a client development meeting, which wasn't unusual. But the vibe in the office felt off. Conversations stopped when I approached. People exchanged awkward glances. I tried to brush it off. I told myself they were just feeling weird about the new partnership. They knew how hard I'd worked. They must have felt sorry for me. I kept telling myself everything was fine. Then I noticed a folder on my desk labeled Client Expenses. Usually I handled these reports, part of my behind-the-scenes work. When I flipped through the pages, I saw dinners at expensive restaurants, spa treatments, and resort stays, all listed as client development. But something was strange. We never took clients to spas. My heart thudded in my chest. I checked the dates. Many overlap with times my husband had said he was too busy to come home early. When I looked at the signatures, they always matched his. It made no sense. Why would he lie? We never hid anything from each other. At least I thought we didn't. A small voice inside whispered, "This isn't normal." Locked in my office, I started making calls. I kept my voice calm and professional, even though my hands shook. I wanted to confirm these bills, see if there was any legitimate reason for them. But each call turned up the same answer. These weren't real client visits. One restaurant told me the reservation had been for only 2 guests. Another said they recognized my husband as a regular, but never saw a client by his side. They mentioned a woman, though. My stomach nodded. I remembered the spa times perfectly, clashed with our date nights that never happened. He'd canceled on me every single time. I stared at the receipts, reading them again and again. My mind raced with explanations. Maybe a new partner from another firm, maybe an investor who wanted privacy. Yet the pieces didn't fit. At the bottom of the file, I found an invoice from a fancy hotel downtown. The date was our wedding anniversary. He'd told me he was stuck in a meeting with lawyers. I had spent that anniversary alone, brushing off my disappointment. Now my hands trembled as I held that paper. Every second, my heart hammered with a growing, horrible realization. Helen's name wasn't on any receipts, but I felt her presence in every line item. Suddenly, every glance she gave him, every moment they laughed together, felt like a clue I'd ignored. The more I connected the dots, the more I wanted to deny it. He couldn't be cheating on me. He was my husband, my partner, the father of our children. But the numbers didn't lie. My mind replayed all the late nights, the business trips, the last-minute client emergencies. Each time I'd accepted his excuses. I wanted to trust him. I loved him. I sacrificed everything to build this company. Now those old stories felt like illusions. I didn't want to act hysterical or confront him on a hunch. I needed more concrete proof. But my soul screamed, "He's already given you enough proof." I stood there, silent, tears burning my eyes. The receipts fanned out on my desk. He had taken our dream and turned it into a cover for his lies. Despair threatened to break me. But then, something fierce ignited inside my chest. I wiped my tears and locked the files away. I would not be the pitiful wife. If he was cheating, I would find every trace. Then he would pay. I forced myself to go on with my day, wearing a calm, pleasant mask. I attended meetings with our staff, discussing budget adjustments and future plans. Everyone looked at me with a strange mix of pity and unease. They likely suspected something was wrong. When I glanced out the window, I saw Helen and my husband returning from lunch. The sight made my heart lurch. He opened the car door for her and laughed at something she said. She touched his hand. A bright wave of anger flooded my chest, but I refused to show it. He passed me in the hallway, acting like nothing was amiss. "Hey, I'm excited to discuss next quarter's outlook with you," he said with a smile. I merely nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of betrayal. Later, I locked myself in the restroom, breathing hard. My reflection stared back at me with hollow eyes. This was not the life I dreamed of when we first fell in love. But I had to be smart. If I charged in screaming, he'd deny everything, turn me into the emotional one. I could lose my leverage. I needed to play the role of the clueless wife a bit longer. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. Then I crept into our home office, opening drawers and digging through old files. I found our marriage certificate, business agreements, and legal documents. My hands trembled as I read the fine print. We'd started this company together when we were young and broke. Everything was co-owned, or so I'd always believed. But over time, the paperwork had shifted. Certain expansions had placed more stock and shares in his name. I remembered signing them back then, trusting him when he said it would be simpler for taxes. Now it felt like a trap. If he really was stepping out on me, he had the upper hand legally. My heart pounded at the thought that maybe he'd planned this all along. No, that was too cruel. He might be a cheater, but he wasn't a monster, or so I hoped. I created digital copies of every important paper. Then I started reading about business law and how partnerships could be dissolved. I felt a cold determination creep over me. My husband had wanted me to be quiet, small, content with being in the background, but he'd forgotten just how smart I could be. I needed someone inside the company who would help me gather facts. But I wasn't sure who I could trust. Most employees respected my husband too much to question him. Helen was too well-liked to challenge. But in the marketing team, there was Lucy, an old friend who'd seen me burn the midnight oil countless times. We met in a coffee shop early the next morning. I kept it casual, pretending it was just a friendly check-in. As we sipped our coffee, Lucy admitted the atmosphere had changed since Helen's promotion. People gossiped about the pair's close relationship. Some said they'd seen them together at odd hours. Lucy looked at me with sympathetic eyes. "I'm sorry if any of this is true," she whispered, carefully. "But people are noticing." Despite the pain stabbing at my chest, I forced a small smile. I told Lucy I appreciated her honesty and asked if she could quietly pass along any suspicious documents. She nodded, concerned but loyal. I left with a mix of sadness and relief. At least I wasn't imagining all this. I had an ally. Outside, the morning air felt chilly against my flushed cheeks. I breathed deep, preparing for the next step. Days passed as I gathered more details. Lucy slipped me copies of travel receipts, email threads marked urgent, and records of last-minute client dinners that never seemed to pan out. I stored each piece in a hidden folder on my personal laptop, double encrypting it so no one would suspect me. My husband grew bolder with Helen, or maybe I just grew more observant. She'd glide into his office, close the door, and they'd stay in there for hours. I'd pop by with a question, only to find the door locked. If I asked about it, he'd dismiss me with a quick excuse. One afternoon, I pretended to leave for a meeting, only to double back and watch. I saw them hurry out of the office, ducking into his car. They drove off, presumably to another client lunch. A sting of betrayal pierced me, but I forced myself to remain calm. Every new clue fueled my determination. This wasn't just about adultery. It was about power, respect, and all the years I'd devoted. My mind buzzed with possibilities. If my husband was using company funds for his affair, I had legal ground to fight back. My hand clenched around my folder. Justice was coming. I made a point of showing up at a staff dinner that Helen had organized. She'd booked a fancy restaurant, inviting select clients and some top executives. At first, I wasn't on the guest list, but I insisted on attending. My husband stiffened when I walked through the door, but Helen flashed that perfect grin. I played the supportive wife flawlessly. I told stories about the early days of the company, the struggles we faced. I charmed the clients, making them laugh and lean closer. Helen tried to lead conversations, but I slid in with facts and figures she couldn't match. I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. My husband kept glancing between us, tense. He tried to steer me away from certain topics, but I was in control tonight. I made sure everyone remembered that I wasn't just his wife. I was the backbone of this firm. When dinner ended, Helen tried to walk out with him. I cut in, looped my arm through his, and gave her a pleasant smile. "It's been a pleasure, Helen," I said softly. She nodded, her eyes calculating. I pretended not to notice. As we stepped away, I felt my husband's heartbeat quicken beneath my touch. That night, as we prepared for bed, I noticed my husband's unease. He couldn't look me in the eye. I tried to act normal, chatting about the evening's success. But inside, I was dying to confront him. My throat felt tight with secrets. He muttered some excuse about being tired and crawled into bed. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. Our wedding photos on the dresser taunted me with happier times. The memory of him carrying me over the threshold still made me smile. How had we come to this? My phone buzzed with a text from Lucy. She'd stumbled on another suspicious invoice, a weekend resort stay. My husband had claimed he was at an out-of-town conference. I clenched my teeth, the betrayal ripping through me all over again. But I stayed quiet. Tomorrow, I thought, I would find a way to use these details against him. We were drifting apart more each day. Yet we still slept under the same roof. My heart shattered a bit, but a new strength held the pieces together. I wouldn't break down. If he thought he could keep me in the dark forever, he was wrong. The next morning, I called my lawyer. She was an old friend from college, someone I trusted. I explained the situation in careful detail. The suspicious expenses, the new partner who seemed more than just a coworker, and my husband's shifting of company assets. She listened quietly, then told me I had a few options. We could file for separation, gather evidence of financial misconduct, or even push for a change in company leadership if I had enough proof. My chest fluttered with a mix of fear and excitement. All my life, I'd seen myself as the loyal wife, the strong supporter. Now I had to be something else, a strategist. My lawyer warned me to move slowly, to keep my cool. If I confronted him too soon, he might try to move even more assets out of my reach. I agreed, the weight of her words heavy on my heart. Before we ended the call, she said, "Remember, if you go down this path, it changes everything. Make sure you're ready." My hand shook as I hung up. I stared at the phone, thinking about our children, our home, our shared dreams. But the path was set. I wasn't turning back. I arranged a high-stakes client meeting with a potential investor who could pour millions into our company. Usually my husband would handle this, but I used my network to lock it down first. Then I invited him and Helen to join, claiming it'd be a team effort. They arrived at the swanky conference room to find me already chatting with the investor. I introduced Helen as our newest partner and watched her try to take control of the conversation. But the investor directed his questions at me, recognizing my knowledge and experience. Helen fumbled. My husband eyed me with confusion, clearly not used to me taking such a lead role. He tried to smooth over the awkward tension, but I pressed forward, discussing strategy and future plans. Helen looked out of her depth, her usual confidence cracked. When the meeting ended, the investor pulled me aside, praising my insights and hinting that he trusted my guidance. I smiled, soaking in Helen's annoyed expression. My husband forced a supportive grin, but I could sense his irritation. I had proven my worth in front of them both. Stepping out of that room, I felt a spark of triumph. This was only the beginning. Back at the office, my husband cornered me. "Why didn't you tell me about that meeting sooner?" he asked, his voice tense. "I thought we shared everything." I took a slow breath, feigning innocence. "It was last minute, and I wanted to be sure it was a solid lead," I said. "I was going to tell you, but you were busy with Helen." His eyes flickered with guilt. "We have to communicate better," he said, not meeting my gaze. "You can't go rogue on big deals." I raised an eyebrow. "Rogue? I thought you'd be proud of me for landing such a big fish." My words were both polite and sharp. He fell silent. I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Maybe he sensed I wasn't the naive wife he'd once believed. As he walked away, I realized that part of me still ached for the marriage we used to have. But another part felt a grim satisfaction. He was beginning to understand that I wasn't going to be sidelined. My husband might have tried to hide his affair behind closed doors, but my quiet rebellion was now out in the open. With Lucy's help, I gathered the last bits of evidence I needed. Email threads between him and Helen, loaded with hints of personal outings disguised as client work. Receipts that showed they used company funds for romantic getaways. And most importantly, forged signatures authorizing questionable budget transfers. I compiled everything into a neat digital folder labeled Plan B. Each piece felt like a stab in my heart, but also a step toward my independence. I knew once I unleashed this information, there'd be no going back. Our marriage, our partnership, our shared life, it would all explode. But the time had come. The illusions couldn't stand any longer. My husband might have thought I was too soft, but I had teeth. I forwarded the files to my lawyer, explaining the significance of each one. She called me the next day, her voice taut with urgency. "We have a strong case," she said. "If you want to fight him legally, we can, but be careful. He might retaliate." I pressed the phone hard against my ear, my heart pounding. "Let him try," I responded, my voice surprisingly steady. "He's the one who lit this fire." I planned a big company gathering to announce a new expansion. Everyone was invited. Staff, clients, potential investors. It would be a night of celebration, or so they thought. My husband and Helen arranged the finer details, confident this was their moment to shine. I played along, acting excited about the event. I told my husband I was proud of him, that I'd do whatever it took to make the night a success. He seemed relieved, maybe even believed I'd come around to accepting Helen's partnership. But a storm brewed within me. Behind the scenes, I coordinated with key allies, Lucy, a few senior employees who'd known me for years, and even some trusted clients. I hinted that there'd be shocking announcements during the party, urging them to attend and pay close attention. As the date drew near, I lined up the final details of my plan. My lawyer stood by, ready to drop a bomb of legal disclosures if needed. My heart raced every time I thought about it, a mix of fear and fierce anticipation. This was the night I would break his carefully crafted facade and show everyone who truly built this empire. The party shimmered with bright lights, elegant table settings, and a full bar. People laughed, clinked glasses, and mingled around the lavish venue. My husband gave a welcoming speech, praising the company's growth and Helen's innovative spirit. She glowed at his side. I stood in the back, letting them have the spotlight. My chest felt tight, but I maintained a calm smile. When the time came for me to speak, I stepped forward to polite applause. I spoke of our humble beginnings, how we started with nothing. My voice caught when I mentioned the sacrifices we both made, nights away from the kids, risking our savings, trusting each other fully. Then, my tone shifted. I thanked everyone for their hard work and loyalty, especially those who had been with us from day one. I glanced at Lucy, who nodded in silent support. I announced exciting partnerships in the pipeline, a future for our company that we could all share in. But as I finished, I glanced at my husband. He looked at me expectantly, not realizing the final curveball I was about to throw. My hand tightened around the microphone. This was the moment I had been planning for weeks. My heart hammered, but my eyes stayed firm. I invited Helen and my husband to join me on stage. They exchanged proud smiles, likely expecting me to praise their leadership. The audience waited, curious. I projected a warm tone, but my pulse thundered. In the past few months, I began, we've faced some unexpected challenges. We've had to review how our funds are used, how our budgets are spent, and how decisions are made at the highest level. Helen's smile wavered. My husband's brow furrowed. I pressed on, describing the importance of trust and transparency in any partnership. Then, I revealed that we'd found irregularities in our financial reports, expenses labeled for client development that weren't legitimate. A hush fell over the room. I saw Helen's cheeks flush. My husband reached for the mic, but I turned slightly, blocking him. Tonight, I said evenly, we're sharing these findings with our legal team and deciding on the best course to protect our company. We won't tolerate misuse of funds. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My husband's hand fell from the microphone, his face pale. Helen stared at me, her eyes wide with panic. I paused, letting the tension fill the air. The unveiling had begun. A stunned silence held the room. My husband reached for my arm, whispering fiercely, "What are you doing?" I ignored him and continued explaining that the company would launch an internal audit. Senior employees, like Lucy, would help oversee it. Helen made a desperate attempt to defend herself. We've always spent within reason," she stammered. "Those documents are incomplete." But Lucy stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "I have copies of all transactions," she said, holding up a thick folder. "We'll let the records speak for themselves." Eyes darted between Helen and my husband. Even our loyal staff looked shocked. Some clients whispered to each other, checking their phones as if searching for more information. The tension was suffocating. My husband tried to regain control, forcing a reassuring smile. "We're a family here," he said. "We'll resolve any confusion." But the words fell flat. The room sensed the turmoil. My heart hammered, but I refused to retreat. I stepped away from the microphone, locking eyes with him. Everything we had built together was at stake. This was the biggest gamble of my life. But I was done covering for his lies. One glance at Helen's stricken face told me it was too late to undo. The event ended in a swirl of confusion. People filed out, whispering among themselves. My husband pulled me into a quiet corner, his face a storm of anger and fear. "This was a low blow," he seethed. "You're making a spectacle. Why didn't you come to me first?" My voice trembled, but I stayed firm. "I tried trusting you, but you broke us. You treated me like a joke." Tears threatened, but I blinked them away. Helen hovered nearby, hands shaking. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "I know about the resorts, the spas, the dinners," I said, my eyes burning. "They're not with clients. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." She wilted, struggling for words. My husband glared at her, then turned back to me. "We can settle this privately," he murmured, desperation in his tone. I shook my head. Too late. In that moment, all the betrayal, all the lies, crystallized into cold determination. I let the silence hang. Then I walked away, leaving them both standing there. My heart pounded with finality. That night, I gathered my children, kissed them goodnight, and vowed I'd protect our future at any cost. In the following days, a swirl of rumors overtook the office. Some employees said I was having a nervous breakdown. Others whispered that Helen and my husband were at the center of a massive scandal. The internal audit began, and new evidence poured in. Receipts for lavish gifts, cozy getaways, all under the company's dime. My husband tried to do damage control, calling emergency board meetings and making excuses for Helen. He insisted it was miscommunication or clerical errors. but it was clear to everyone something deeper was amiss. Meanwhile, I stayed mostly behind the scenes, letting the audit team handle the data. I sought advice from my lawyer almost daily. She told me we were building a strong case. If needed, we could push for the dissolution of his leadership. We had the grounds to prove unethical conduct. Yet I also knew going public with an affair would devastate our children. They were almost grown, but they still loved their father. I wrestled with guilt. Even though he betrayed me, part of me clung to the life we once shared. But each day, that nostalgia faded further. My only focus now was on saving what was mine and securing the future for our kids. That evening, I gathered our twins in the living room. They were old enough to sense the tension. They'd heard whispers at school, seen the stressed looks we wore. I owed them the truth, or at least a version they could handle. I explained that their father and I were going through a tough time. The company's finances were under review, and there might be legal battles ahead. I tried to keep it gentle, but my voice wavered. They glanced at each other, then back at me. One asked quietly, "Did Dad do something wrong?" I hesitated, tears burning behind my eyes. "He made choices that hurt our family," I said at last. "He still loves you both, but our relationship is complicated now." Their eyes shone with concern. Seeing their worry sliced through me like a knife. But they were nearly adults, and I knew they deserved honesty, not another lie. I promised I would always be there for them, no matter what happened. In that moment, a wave of sadness washed over me. My husband's betrayal hadn't just fractured our marriage, it threatened the unity of our family. But I wouldn't let his decisions define us. I held my children close, wishing I could shield them from all the pain. The audit results came in. My lawyer and I reviewed them, heart-pounding. They confirmed everything I suspected and more. Helen and my husband had diverted company funds for personal use, disguised as client entertainment. The trail of evidence was undeniable. Using these findings, my lawyer filed the necessary motions to remove my husband from his own leadership position. It sounded dramatic, but the board had to take it seriously. Financial misconduct was a serious offense. Even if he tried to twist the story, the numbers wouldn't lie. My husband stormed into my office, slamming the door behind him. "You're destroying us," he shouted, panic bright in his eyes. "The board is in chaos. Investors are pulling out." I stood tall. "You did this to yourself. You lied to me, to everyone. I won't let you drag me down." My voice shook with anger and heartbreak. He stared at me, searching for the woman he once knew, the trusting partner who would always stand by him. But she was gone. As he walked out, I felt a sense of finality. This was it. The life we built, the dreams we shared, all burned to ash. Now it was time to rise from the rubble on my own terms. A week later, the board voted. They asked my husband to step aside while the investigations continued. Helen resigned under pressure, her career in tatters. The media buzzed with rumors of the scandal, but I kept my head high, focusing on what lay ahead. My children stood by me, their eyes brimming with both sadness and pride. Even as my husband packed his things and left the office for the last time, I felt no triumph. Just a quiet resolve. He had betrayed me, but I refused to destroy myself in the process. I took control of the company, promising employees a fresh start. Though the road ahead wasn't easy, I found a strange peace in the turmoil. I had come full circle, from a supportive wife in the background to the leader at the helm. The press dubbed me the firm's Iron Lady, but I was just a woman reclaiming her destiny. On my first day as official head of operations, I stood in front of the entire staff. I thanked them for their hard work and vowed to rebuild trust. My heart beat with a renewed fire. Betrayal had forged something unbreakable inside me. And in that moment, I knew I was finally ready.